world is full of people thinking about Star Wars. The big questions are all asked. Did Greedo shoot first? Answer no. Is Rey a Mary Sue? Answer maybe. Is The Last Jedi the worst Star Wars film or the best? But I'm not interested in all that. What if instead we go deep? Cut open its insides like Han Solo with the Tauntaun and see what makes it tick. What is the deeper meaning of Star Wars? Star Wars is an inversion of the power fantasy. At the center of Star Wars is an inversion of power fantasy. Contrast Star Wars against the movies of Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sly Stallone or any Marvel movie. Movies such as Commando, Cobra, or Captain Marvel are what we call power fantasies. In a power fantasy, the hero succeeds through sheer force of will or physical strength. But often Star Wars rejects this. The most powerful people in Star Wars are often the smallest.
Judge me by my size, do you?
Ewoks are the perfect example of this. They were meant to parallel Vietnam and the American Empire's invasion of Nam. Lucas wanted to show the most technologically advanced empire in the world go against determined little teddy bears armed with sticks and stones and get their ass handed to them. Star Wars differs from so much of our media as it does not value physical power. When Luke ends the Emperor, he does not do it through strength. He does it by tossing his lightsaber aside. He does it through compassion for his father. Star Wars is an anti-power fantasy, where the small, the inconsequential are the heroes. This is the idea behind R2-D2. R2 saves everyone in every single movie. Without R2, everyone would have died in Episode 4. Now, C-3PO is pretty useless, but that doesn't negate how much R2 matters. Even Jar Jar Binks, who's basically a space moron, saves the day in a battle, sort of accidentally. R2 and C-3PO were meant to be homage for the two peasant characters in Akira Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress. R2-D2 and C-3PO are ordinary servants thrown into extraordinary circumstances, and in the case of R2, become the hero. In fact, R2 saves everybody in every movie he's in. What is significant about this is the majority of our action films are power fantasies, sending the message to the audience that those with strength are righteous. Now sure, Star Wars also at times traffics in power fantasy. We imagine and fantasize about having the power of a Jedi, to move things with our mind. But in the end, what brings victory is never power. This is where Star Wars, when it is done right, differs from other hero stories. In Star Wars, Luke does not win because he is powerful. He is the last X-Wing left, the last hope. He wins by firing an impossible shot, by trusting the Force. In Return of the Jedi, Luke is only victorious when he tosses aside his lightsaber. It is the only way. Luke cannot destroy the Emperor. Anyone who watched Clone Wars knows this, and when there is a failure, it is because the hero has succumbed to this power fantasy. Anakin is corrupted by power fantasy, by the belief that he might one day gain the power to stop death. In Rogue One, the Empire is not defeated through strength, but through sacrifice. Now compare this to the ending of Captain Marvel or Thor Ragnarok. Both modern movies made by the same parent company. In both films, the hero succeeds through unlocking a special power or ability. Well, to be clear, I'm not against power fantasy. In fact, I kind of love it. Like most people, I enjoy them a lot. I love Arnold Schwarzenegger movies and Sly Stallone movies. Power fantasy can serve its purpose. Marvel movies are entirely power fantasies. Often the power fantasy can serve the purpose of giving people who do not feel very powerful in real life a vision of themselves that is more powerful. And that can be a way of uplifting the audience. That serves a purpose. But the danger of indulging solely in power fantasy is it reinforces a system that values power as its primary virtue. In general, I don't advocate to get rid of any kind of story. Instead, let's create a counter-narrative, and this is what Star Wars does. Star Wars offers that there are forces capable of overcoming power. Forces like compassion, sacrifice, intuition. Star Wars offers an alternative idea to the concept that power makes right. And this is where some of the new Star Wars misses the point. It often succumbs to the same obsession with power worship that Lucas argues against in the first series and shows the consequences of in the prequels. Take this moment from Obi-Wan Kenobi. This is power worship. This is, at its heart, missing the point of Star Wars. And the consequences of power worship as the dominant narrative can be devastating. It is no secret that George Lucas saw the Empire as a stand-in for America. Lucas was a child of the 60s, but where his peers were dropping out and dropping acid, Lucas played it straight, but the rebellion came out in a different way.
In school, I was of the, angry young man.
Sure, you were a rebel.
You did something very interesting with Star Wars, if you think about it. The good guys are the rebels. They're using asymmetric warfare against a highly organized empire. I think we call those guys terrorists today. We call them Mujahideen, we call them Al-Qaeda.
When I did it, they were Viet Cong.
Exactly. So were you thinking of that at the time?
Yes.
Star Wars is an anti-authoritarian text, arguing against all forms of oppression, even when the oppressor is us.
We're fighting the largest empire in the world.
Right.
And we're just a bunch of hayseeds in coonskin hats that don't know
right.
nothing.
That's right.
And it was the same thing with the Vietnamese.
Yep.
The irony of that one is in both of those, the little guys won.
Right.
And the big, highly technical empire,
The English Empire, right?
the English
British
empire, the American empire,
Yep.
lost.
Yeah.
That was the whole point.
Subscribe to Catharsis Machine, you will.
You can see the roots of Star Wars in George Lucas's mega hit film American Graffiti. It's about growing up in Modesto, California, and dreaming of getting out, dreaming of bigger things. You can also see the parallels between Richard Dreyfuss's Kurt and Luke, as they both yearn for a bigger life. Star Wars is a hero's journey, and at the heart of every hero's journey is a coming-of-age story, a ritual of transformation. Lucas has talked about a lack of heroes at the time Star Wars came out. We have no lack of heroes anymore, maybe a few too many in fact, but at the time, 70s cinema was a place for gritty tragedy with a dark protagonist and downer endings. In this book, The Power of Ritual, the author discusses the need for ritual in society. Rituals cement the important moments of our lives in memory, but so much of modern society has forgotten the importance of ritual. The hero's journey returns the ritual of the coming of age to the culture through story. In creating Star Wars, Lucas sought to bring an ancient myth into the modern era. Much has been written about Lucas's obsession and friendship with Joseph Campbell, how he built Star Wars on the bones of the hero's journey, which I go into in great detail in my video on the real hero's journey, links in the description below. But if Star Wars is the hero's journey in its purest form, then by understanding the core meaning of the hero with 1,000 faces, we can understand Star Wars. So what is the core meaning of the hero's journey? Joseph Campbell talks about a coming-of-age ritual in certain Aboriginal tribes. In the ritual, the boys are told they're going to be circumcised by their fathers. As a part of the ritual, the boys run from their fathers into their mother's arms, and they are pried away by the fathers, held down to a rock and circumcised. The father's act creates fear and resentment against the father, but the father is just playing their part in the ritual. In the stage of the hero's journey called the Atonement of the Father, the hero has an earth-shattering revelation that temporarily turns the hatred inward toward the father, toward the hero's shadow. In The Hero with 1,000 Faces, Joseph Campbell writes about the necessity of turning the hatred inward, the realization that you are part of the problem. He writes that societies that do not turn against themselves will become lost in nationalism, self-worship. They are boys who never pulled away from their mother's breast and are incapable of seeing the truth about the place they come from. The hero's journey is a separation from what you know and an entering into a ritual to become a complete person. In the moment where Luke discovers his father is Vader, he finally understands that what he thought was evil has been inside of him all along. This moment is telegraphed when Luke enters the swamp in Dagobah. He hears something and Yoda tells him to investigate. He tells him he will not need his lightsaber, but Luke ignores his mentor and takes it anyway. He sees Vader and they clash sabers. Luke cuts off Vader's head. The faceplate explodes, revealing Luke's face. This moment echoes Carl Jung's idea of the shadow. Carl Jung was a famous psychologist that created many ideas that have survived to this day and infected storytelling. A shadow is a dark reflection of a person. Facing your shadow is part of Carl Jung's process of individuation. When you face the shadow, you travel into your opposite. Luke shows his flaw by ignoring Yoda's suggestion to leave his lightsaber behind. This moment echoes the end of Return of the Jedi, where Luke faces off against Vader. He knocks him down and cuts off his hand. He's about to kill him, but he stops himself. He looks at Vader, looks at his own mechanical hand, and he tosses away the lightsaber. He turns the hatred inward, but in the end, the hero cannot hold on to that hatred. They must move beyond it. In the end of the trilogy, Luke accepts the Father inside of him and tosses the lightsaber aside. He has moved beyond hatred, but the hatred was essential to his growth. It is essential for the son to rebel against the past to create a new future. Otherwise, there is no growth, no way for society to progress. This is what the hero's journey does. It takes the hero through a harsh and brutal transformative ritual that challenges the core of who they are. At the end of the journey, the hero will have gone on a journey to transform their world and instead will find they have transformed themselves. In the end, the journey exists to bring Luke in touch with the Force. So what is the Force? In analyzing what the Force means, it is important to understand how it contrasts against the Empire. In storytelling, often we have reflections. Some element of the story may reflect another element. It shows itself in contrast. The Empire is concerned with order above all. Sure, they are capable of destroying planets, but other than that, this act, they are concerned with bringing order to the galaxy. Palpatine, played with glorious malevolence by Ian McDiarmid, is the epitome of evil, or is he? Or does he just simply believe that he is the best person to run the galaxy? Maybe he believes that order is the way, and his evil acts are justified by the control he has brought to the galaxy. For what other use does power have for Palpatine? Now, Lucas has talked about how the dark side is about greed, but I don't buy it, and I'm not necessarily stuck to what Lucas thinks about these things. There's always a point at which the audience gets to interpret it for themselves, and Palpatine doesn't look greedy to me. I mean, look at the way he lives. What other use does power have for Palpatine? He doesn't live well. His clothes are not the garish gold of a Scarface. They are the black robes of a monk. So what does Palpatine gain from power if he does not desire material things? Palpatine desires power simply for the sake of power. The Sith desire to control life itself. Mastery over death is a philosophy based on fear. When one fears life, they desire to control it. Sure, Palpy looks pure evil, but Lucas doesn't seem to believe in that, as he states here.
Good and evil in us, as well as our institutions. So, and the idea that some of us think we're really great people, but in the real world we're not. We're terrible people.
Or you can make bad choices.
Well, you make bad choices, but you run your life in a very selfish way, and you think you're doing good when you're actually not. And at the same time, it's how do democracies turn back into dictatorships? Why do people who have the power to have the freedom and everything turn it over to somebody who's going to take it all away from them?
See, he's interested not in evil, but in how a person's belief that they are doing what is best for society can create evil. And look at the society before the Empire. It was always in conflict. This was not a good place. They have slaves. There's conflict everywhere. There's corruption everywhere. The Empire believes in order. So if the Empire is that which believes order is the way to maintain life, then what is the Force? The philosophy of the Force is the opposite of order. It is knowing that you cannot control the universe. You don't control the Force, you let it flow through you. Anger is a reaction to a loss of control. The idea of the Force might be summed up in this interaction at the end of Ozu's classic Tokyo story.
いやね、世の中って。そう、嫌なことばっかり。
A Sith rages against the world in a hopeless and lost quest to control what cannot be controlled. They are incapable of happiness. Corrupted so completely there must only be two of them because they must always watch their back for the moment when their apprentice tries to kill them. The Sith's need for control is so absolute they can never see how impossible it all is. And we don't have to see the backstory of each of these villains to know that their corruption comes from fear. Although these origin stories have been chronicled in novels and comic books, some canon, some not, we can only guess that their origin story goes something like this. The rise and fall of Anakin Skywalker. At the core of Star Wars is the rise and fall of Anakin Skywalker. Prophesied to bring balance to the Force, this prophecy comes true, but in a way no one, not even a Jedi, could foresee. It is Anakin Skywalker who destroys the Jedi and brings Palpatine to power, and ultimately, it is Anakin Skywalker who then destroys Palpatine, bringing balance to the Force. It is an ugly process and a pattern that often is replicated in history. Society becomes complacent, silly, disordered, and then a massive wave of violence arises and takes over, destroying the status quo. That new order may be fascist and will eventually need to be rebelled against, overthrown, and then balance restored until the cycle begins again. The prequels are not great movies, okay? But they do tell a great story. It's just the delivery that's off. Delivery aside, the rise and fall of Anakin Skywalker is an incredible tale of Shakespearean depth, even if the dialogue ain't exactly Shakespeare. Anakin begins as the chosen one. Again, this is George Lucas establishing an idea and then destroying it. This is an anti-chosen one story. Anakin is an angry young man, something the Jedi Council senses when it denies that he should be taught. Anakin goes against the wishes of the Jedi Council. He begins to lie, suggesting to Padme they should hide their love from the Council. When he has visions of her death, he seeks the power to change the future. And when Palpatine tells him this power is the only way he can save her, he succumbs. But the seeds of his downfall have been sown throughout the story. As in most tragic stories, there will be somewhere in the story a hint there's something wrong with this character, a hint they are off balance. Watch this moment. Obi-Wan would be grumpy if he caught me doing this. He's using the Force as a parlor trick. He does not respect the power he wields. This is written into lore about the dark side. The Force lightning is something only the dark side can wield, right? It is not that Yoda can't use Force lightning. He just won't. He won't do it because power corrupts, and only through denial of that power can one stay balanced. But Anakin is all impulse, all id. He is the chosen one, and he believes it. He serves his own ego above all else. This is what evil is to George Lucas. It is not a person who wears black or a simple idea of black versus white. Star Wars destroys the concept of evil. Star Wars is often described as a simple tale of good versus evil, but it is neither. First of all, it isn't simple, and part of what is so great about Star Wars is the way it obliterates the audience's concept of evil. Star Wars doesn't believe in evil, not in how it is traditionally seen, at least. It helps to remember how we are supposed to watch it. As a kid in 1977, when I first saw Star Wars, yeah, I'm that fucking old, Darth Vader was the personification of evil. He might as well have been Satan himself, and then this happened. This moment destroyed all simple concepts of good and evil for me forever. Concepts as a kid you'd been sold on. The trick of showing Vader as the most evil thing imaginable, then revealing he started out good, shatters the perception of everyone who watches it. That's why if you are going to show the movie to a kid, you must watch them in the original order. Denying the audience the revelation that Vader is Luke's father undercuts the power of the story. Even more important is to leave time between watching the movies. There were years between A New Hope and Empire. Years where we played with toys and role-played and imagined Vader as the source of all evil. Those years baked that idea into my consciousness, so that one day when we discovered the truth, just like for Luke, it was ego-shattering.
I mean, people, were curious about whether it was true or not, and I purposely left it so that it would be ambiguous, so that you wouldn't really know, and people would sort of debate it for the next, I had 2 more years or more to. I wanted people to sort of debate whether it's true or not true, or like sort of thing.
Grasping the concept that evil isn't simple, that there really is only corruption, is an important part of a person's growth. A child exists in the simple idea that there are good things and bad things. An adult grows beyond it, or so you'd hope, but our political landscape might tell us the opposite. The reality is those that wear white hats may still be evil. Good people are capable of awful things, and the ones we know to be evil didn't necessarily start that way. Sure, there are exceptions like a Ted Bundy, but for the most part, it is a corrupting ideology that changes a person from good to evil. But the brilliance of Star Wars is the way it establishes an idea and then destroys it. It is deconstructive by nature. Star Wars is a deconstruction. When watching the Luke Skywalker saga, we imagine what a better world it would be if only the Jedi ruled. And then, in the prequels, we saw it, and it's not so great. The Republic is a mess. There's slavery, there's conflict everywhere, the Jedi Council are ineffective, the Senate is corrupt, worthless, incapable of ruling. Sound familiar? By setting us up to spend 3 movies wanting a world where the Jedi are in a place of power, and then showing us that world and showing it to be corrupt in a different way, but still corrupt, this story brilliantly teaches the concepts of postmodernism. Postmodernism is a movement in philosophy and art that is distrustful of all meta-narratives. What is a meta-narrative? A meta-narrative is a story used as an underlying formative idea that a culture is built on. It's a worldview in a way. It's a story we tell ourselves to control and construct this worldview. Postmodernism, particularly in art, and let's stick with how it is used in art as opposed to philosophy. I'm sure you philosophy majors in the comments will gladly tell me how I get it wrong, and I welcome that. My understanding of it comes from art, and here we have to do a brief, probably simplistic, and inaccurate analysis of art history. The movement called modernism sought to attack the fundamental narratives society is built on. Narratives such as religion, American exceptionalism, or dominant political ideologies such as capitalism or imperialism. These new artists, the modernists, sought to overthrow the status quo and replace it with a new, more pure society. Postmodernism came along as a reaction to this concept. The postmodernists saw that once the old status quo was burned down and replaced by the modernist concept of the world, the new narrative simply becomes a new authoritarian idea, one that also must be torn down. Rather than believing they know the way, the postmodern artist believes all ways of organizing the universe must be met with the same level of distrust. And this is what happens in the prequels. We are shown a corrupt society that is then overthrown by a fascist, that is then overthrown by rebels who inevitably will replace it with a society that will believe it has the way but will eventually grow corrupt. Star Wars is an anti-authoritarian text. It understands that there cannot be one way of thinking or an idea or principle of organizing the universe. There can only be an ever-changing, evolving system, an establishing of the status quo, followed by its violent destruction, followed by the emergence of a new idea, followed by the corruption of that idea. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Any attempt to control the universe results in corruption. The only way is surrender to the graceful energy flowing through the universe. And this, ultimately, is what Star Wars is all about. May the Force be with you. Now, of course, this is what I see in Star Wars, but all stories are reflections of the viewer, and I'm going to bring my own baggage to it. Maybe you see something different. If you see something different, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to talk to you about it.